So I believe one of the greatest goals of entrepreneurship, or at least for me, is to be able to buy back my time. And maybe that's why you started your business. Maybe you started your business because you wanted to create this financial freedom that would allow you to do the things that you really wanted to. And then it got to the point where maybe you feel like a slave to your business from like a time standpoint. And so, what good is it to have all the financial resources you want, but be a slave to your business and have no time to enjoy those things and to do the things that you actually want to do with those resources? And so I want to talk through what that kind of looks like from a practical standpoint. I want to share some just philosophies that we have found as far as like, hey, if the goal of entrepreneurship is to be able to, meaning to have the resources to then buy back your time so that you can continue to do what you thrive at and what you love, that produces the most income for you, that gives you the most time flexibility, then it's going to require other people. And so I was this has been kind of a little topic that's been going on inside our community a little bit. As we get out of Q4, naturally what happens in the fourth quarter of every year is it's the quarter when people spend the most money on gifts and products. And so usually there's more online sales than any other quarter. Well, not most of the time. There is more online sales in Q4 than any other quarter of the year. So what happens is when you come out of like this momentum-driven season and you're sitting in a heavy cash position, there's all this growth that happens. Well, naturally, the next move is to say, okay, we need to begin hiring, or we need to decide what are our next moves. And I need some help because now we've really grown and we want to take this to new levels based on our 2024 goals. So who should I hire next? And so this is kind of a conversation we've been having a lot inside of our coaching community, and I've been having a lot of one-on-ones and kind of seeing this is something that a lot of people are like, what do I do? Well, what I decided to do is I want to piece together like our philosophies and show you here's how we would do it in a really practical sense, and then what those first 5 hires are based on your business. But I was kind of curious, so I wrote out my list, and I was kind of curious to say like, well, what do all the big people out there say? Like, what are the first 5 hires for an e-commerce business? And so I went and I Googled it. I just wanted to see what people came up with. And Forbes says that the very first hire that you as a small business, e-commerce in particular, should do is hire a head of e-commerce. Okay, well, what's number 2? You should hire a VP of marketing. So as a small business, first of all, I don't even know what I call myself yet, right? I'm a business owner, I'm a founder. Do I call myself CEO? Maybe it depends on how big my ego is. And then you start talking about a head of e-commerce, a VP of marketing, when you're like, dude, I'm just here trying to make some sales. I'm trying to figure this out. I just broke my first 6-figure year, or I'm doing a couple $100,000 a year. I'm trying to find that first hire, or I have like a support person, but I don't know, should I hire production? Should I hire an agency? I think we need to be a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to break down my list, but I want you to first start with, I want to share with you a simple way of thinking about the activities that you do, because the first question is, well, what do I need to outsource and get off my plate? And then who do I need to outsource to? And so I want to start with kind of the what. And so one way that I like to think of activities is very, very basic. I like to think of it in terms of, and I had a friend tell me this at a mastermind that I was in, and he probably got it from somewhere, so I'm trying not to plagiarize here. The idea is, think of your activities in terms of $10 an hour tasks, $100 an hour tasks, $1,000 an hour tasks, and $10,000 per hour tasks. And so if you start to look at the work you do throughout the day, every little detailed piece that you do, every little task, ask yourself, is this $10, $100, $1,000, or $10,000 an hour work that I'm doing, or a task that I'm doing? So an example of $10 an hour tasks might be, hey, I'm ordering inventory, I'm scheduling social media posts, I'm bookkeeping, I'm managing customer success and tickets and returns, and dealing with like rude dumbos that are emailing me about something that they clearly didn't read that was right in front of them on the page, right? Dealing with like product production. Maybe you have a very simple to make product, you do it in-house, and it takes like 3 minutes to make the widget or whatever that might be, or sew the thing or piece the thing together. That's $10 an hour activities, right? That's what I'd probably put under that. Under 100 a little bit higher. This might be like website work, more tech-related software implementation, sending emails and scheduling those, writing the social media posts. And then maybe $1,000 an hour work. These are those things that actually move the needle and the things that you really enjoy. But ultimately, if we're still thinking on the business level, it's the things that produce the most dollars. This is the highest leverage activities you can do. And this might look like managing ads. It might look like writing content or copy and building creatives, managing team members, right? Those are those $1,000 an hour activities. And then 10,000 is when you really zoom out, and this is when you're living, if you're only in $10,000 tasks, these are those tasks that are really why you got in business in the first place. This might be casting vision for the company, leading your leaders, thinking, doing product innovation in new ways of developing or creating things. And so if you think of your work in those different terms. What's the $10 an hour work, $100 an hour work, $1,000 an hour work, $10,000 an hour work? Then it allows you to say, okay, this will help me in determining who can help carry out the tasks that I need to do. But one thing I want to just really quickly share here is I think when you look at it in those terms, it's great in theory, right? But at the same time, you kind of have to act to your wage, right? where like if you're doing under $100,000 a year, hiring an agency that's $50,000 a year probably doesn't make sense. And so your objective is to slowly outsource the $10 an hour tasks, and then the $100 an hour tasks, and then the $1,000 an hour tasks. So then you're living in your greatest potential in these high value tasks. And so I used to think in terms of $10,000, $100,000, and $10,000 an hour. I used to think of it in terms of that. But the problem and the question that always still remained to me was like, what do you outsource? And then also how much are you able to afford to pay for it? Because some things you want to outsource, you just can't afford to outsource yet. You're not there. So the question is like, well, how much can I afford to outsource? How much should I afford to pay somebody or contract somebody? And so with these hires in mind, I want you to use the benchmark of, can I afford to outsource this right now? And if so, pass go, collect $200, and then move on to the hiring phase of these people. And so how much can you afford? There's a great book that by Dan Martell. It's called Buy Back Your Time. Perfect for this podcast episode. And he had a really tangible strategy, and I adopted this. Really, really simple. And he said, basically, if somebody it costs you 25% of your take-home pay, then you hire them to do that thing and never do it again. And then he kind of applies this to all areas of his life, from like housework to groceries to lawn care to his business. And so I'm going to kind of look at this from the business standpoint. And so he teaches this concept called the buyback rate, meaning this is how much you can afford to outsource to this person or to this contract, to this like in-house hire or to this contractor of some kind. And so the simple thing is to take your income and your annual income and divide it by the number of hours that you work in a day, and then divide that by 4. So for example, I might make my annual income might be $100,000, and then I work 2,000 hours per year, not per day, I'm sorry. How many hours per year? So $100,000 divided by 2,000 hours per year, that's $50 an hour is my average take home. But it doesn't mean I go hire a $50 an hour person. It means that I hire someone at 25% of that. So what that means is $12.50 an hour is what you can afford. And I already know you're probably like, hey, who's going to work for me for $12.50 an hour? Well, it might mean that you haven't earned the right to have the revenue to pay someone more. It means you need to optimize your process and maybe take some of your attention and go put it on something that's actually going to produce more profit, so that way you can afford to hire somebody else. So when you take all your income, distributions, profit shares, all of that stuff at the end of the year, divided by the number of hours you typically work, 2,000 is a regular 40-hour work week with 2 weeks off, and that's the hourly rate you can afford. But here's the cool thing. You might think, hey, nobody will work for that. Well, Virtual assistants will work for that, and they'll even work for less than that, depending on where they're from. And they're fantastic, and it's life-changing to hire them, and they're so grateful for that work. I know it has to be outside of the U.S. if you're in the U.S. or Canada or U.K., wherever you're at. It might be like from the Philippines, which are well known for some of the best VAs on the planet. But you could hire on Fiverr, you can hire on Upwork, and you can hire on freelance.com to do stuff, even if it's fixed projects for like, hey, I need some ad creatives, and it's $20 for 5 creatives. We've done that. It's not that hard. $20, 5 creatives. And one thing that we also don't think about is maybe a bookkeeper won't manage your books for $12.50 an hour. But let's say that it takes you 3 or 4 times longer to do your books and your accounting or whatever because you don't understand it, you hate it, you despise it, you procrastinate, you're not familiar with the tool, etc. Well, then if it takes you 3 times longer, then 3 of your hours is equal to 1 of theirs. So if 3 of your hours is $12.50, then that's $37.50 for 1 of theirs. And you can find bookkeepers for $37.50 for an hour, and then they just work the couple hours a month or whatever you need for them. And so with that in mind, my recommendation, if you're going to hire, is first to say, answer the question, what am I doing that I need to outsource? And then who do I think would I need for that role? And then ask myself, can I afford to hire that role? And if I can't afford it, it means I need to optimize my life or in the way I operate my business in some other angle to create more profit, to maybe stop doing some things because it means that I'm too spread thin and I'm not profitable enough that if I bring in an employee, I bring in someone else, it's gonna put me in a harder spot. And so that said, there are five hires that we do or that we recommend in this order. And so let's go ahead, let's dive in. So the first one is, this is gonna be more like an admin role. Typically bookkeeping. Bookkeeping is in taxes, one of the first things I recommend getting off your plate. This might be ordering, it might be someone for social media scheduling, etc. And so this is one of those first things that like your value is not in doing books, I promise. Your value, unless you're a bookkeeping service, right? Your value is not in doing the actual books or the taxes or even scheduling your stuff on social media. You might write the content on social media, but taking the hours to schedule it is probably not worth your time. This could be a part-time role too. You don't need someone full-time. Like a virtual assistant is great and can fill in a lot of stuff here. In other words, these are largely $10 an hour activities, would fall under the admin category. And while you might not pay them $10 an hour, you pay them based on your, what you can actually afford, and you budget that all in to make sure it all makes sense. But the admin is that first role. Once you've kind of done that, now you kind of move to this next level, to where admin is more behind the scenes, but the next role is a customer success type role. And this is where it moves in front of the scenes. This might be tickets, someone who manages tickets and returns and exchanges and emails from customers and calls from customers. And guess what? This could also be a part-time person. VAs also could work for this. You could train up customer success. You might not have someone that comes in and has the goal of staying with you for 52 years and retiring from your company and customer success, but you can get some college kids to help you out, and it's flexible with them, and they just have to do 2 hours a day, an hour in the morning, hour in the evening. They make some extra money on top of their college, tuition that they have to pay. It helps cover food and stuff like that. And so this also could be a part-time person until it has a need to become a full-time thing. Once you have admin and customer success, usually it moves into production. If you don't have a 3PL, if you don't do print on demand, but if you do those and you don't make your products in-house, then hey, you kind of skip this and you move to the next phase. But if you do make things in-house, as your sales rise, that's usually one of the first bottlenecks that happen. So admin stuff, get stuff off your plate so you can do higher leverage activities that produce more sales. As you make more sales, customer support, success stuff gets offloaded off your plate so you can continue doing those to make more sales. Now, as your customers go up, as all this is coming together, as the marketing and the things that are more high leverage that I'll talk about in a moment are coming together, then usually production, if you do stuff in-house, becomes that bottleneck. And then usually you're still probably doing it and you become the bottleneck. So in the last year, we've worked with several dozen companies that have all experienced that, to where where they actually found the dial, which was the marketing. They flipped the marketing dial, and they got so many customers that they ran out of product, and they couldn't make it fast enough, and there were backlogs, and then they had to throttle things back, which, hey, that's just another business challenge, and it's a cool challenge to have. But this is where, if you're experiencing, that's the symptom, right? If you're experiencing this throttling by not being able to make enough, then that means you probably need that production hire, somebody to come in. And again, this is still, in my opinion, unless you make a sophisticated product, this is still like $10 an hour activity. And you might pay them 15, or you might pay them 17 or 20 or whatever that might be. There's a fair wage where you're at. But ultimately, this is going to give you more time to go streamline the most important things in your business. But the reason we don't I would say this is one of the most common ones as the first hire, where you're hand making everything. And so you're like, I need someone else to hand make with me. So you hire someone else to come in and hand make versus outsourcing bookkeeping and admin stuff and customer success stuff. And you outsource production first. But if you do those first, you're going to stay in production longer, but it gives you this opportunity to really streamline the systems and the production process because you're in it more frequently, which actually builds a better foundation for when you make this third hire, which is a production person. Once we get through those, there are two more, and I kind of put them in two buckets. And this is going to vary greatly based on what your business is and what kind of marketing activities you do. So I look at the fourth hire as a secondary marketing role. And whatever title you might give, this is going to be kind of based on what you do. So this might be somebody that is doing stuff on your website and doing photography or doing social media or doing email and SMS. And so these are like secondary, like they're marketing channels that you do, but they don't produce a mass amount of revenue. Usually ads, I would say by and large, ads produce the most revenue for most businesses in e-commerce that are growing and running advertising. It's the lion's share. So I might not put ads in there. I'm going to save that for more of it's a bigger role that we'll talk about in a moment. But secondary marketing roles are things that it's like, hey, if I keep doing this, it'll maintain, but if I stop doing this, my business won't go under. If we had a client the other day say, hey, she had an issue with her ads and they were down for like a week, and her sales went from like 1,000 a day to 100 a day, and then she turned her ads back on, and then her sales went right back up. And so like that to me is not something you hand off here yet. That's going to be what we would want to hand off next. This is the kind of thing where like, hey, I'm scheduling 3 social media posts a week. Great, somebody can take over that marketing role, right? And if you stop posting those 3, your sales and your whole business is probably not going to implode and go under. So the higher leverage and the more impact that the activity has on your business, that is the last thing you want to outsource. And so the fourth hire, secondary marketing role, based on what you do for marketing in your business, my advice is to have somebody that will do a little bit of all of this. If they're doing email, they can do SMS, similar stuff to social media. You could teach them the website. They could understand some of those inner workings. And here's the cool thing. Simultaneously, you could have someone who begins as something lower and grows to that. You might have an admin person that also, by the way, is tech savvy and becomes that secondary marketing role. And now you're kind of starting to fulfill both of those roles until you grow to a point where each of them have to have their own full-time people within them. So the fourth hire is a secondary marketing role. Usually this is going to be either outsourced to it might be to an agency. I would just really watch your costs on that, but it might be outsourced or it might be in-house. The final thing that I recommend outsourcing is going to be your primary marketing role. This is stuff that is this is flipped around. Usually this is one of the first things I see e-commerce businesses outsource, where they outsource their advertising to an agency that charges them an arm and a leg to manage it and eats all of their profits, and they don't know their numbers. And I just heard a horror story. Actually, I was on a call yesterday with somebody who hired an agency. In a matter of 2 months, he put them $40,000 in debt because he was scaling so aggressively and the numbers were not what it shook out to be. And so my advice is, before you outsource your primary marketing role, which to me is advertising, writing content, building great creative, or maybe even outsourcing that if you need to, and understanding how advertising works are the most crucial things you should hand off last, especially as an e-commerce business. If you were a service-based business, usually sales are one of the last things that are handed off. Typically, it's admin stuff, and it's all those other things I mentioned that we hand off first. Sales is last. In the e-commerce world where we live, the last thing you want to outsource is the goose that lays the golden eggs. And this is typically your high primary marketing activities or that actually produce most profit. For the most of us, that is advertising. And so these are the things that you can acquire the skills. I know you can. So like if you want to outsource it, question, hey, am I outsourcing because it's easy and convenient now? Or is it because I don't want to learn things? Or is it because I genuinely believe that this is going to actually help me? And I would be surprised. You might be surprised at what you're actually capable of when you sit down. It is funny to me though that this is the most common thing offloaded, but it's the hard stuff to do and it's the most expensive. And we often keep the easy stuff to do in our business, like the admin, the bookkeeping, etc. And we continue doing the things that are actually the cheapest to outsource. So if we could flip that, we work on the hard stuff in the business that are expensive to outsource, that we probably have no business outsourcing yet, and we outsource the cheapest, easiest stuff to do, then eventually we focus on advertising and getting our skills up, and then that actually is no longer hard. It becomes medium, and then it becomes easy, and where you can actually do it very efficiently inside your business to where you kind of look back and you're like, why did I ever put this off? And so the cool thing in all of this is if you kind of go through these hours, so the first thing we have is admin with bookkeeping, taxes, ordering, maybe even scheduling stuff, then customer success, then we move into someone for a production role, and then the fourth role is like a secondary marketing role where it's not like the bread-winning marketing strategy for you, but then the final thing you outsource is your primary marketing role. If you do things in this order, then it's going to allow you to be always in the highest value activity you could do, which is those eventually out of the $10 into the $100, out of the $100 into the $1,000, then out of the $1,000 into the $10,000 activities. It's going to push you in that direction a lot faster. And then people may ascend with you as you do that. Like the person doing social and email and SMS might become proficient and interested in like copywriting and paid media buying. Or maybe you grow to the point where the person who did all of your secondary marketing becomes only an email marketing manager, because now you have to have someone who does email and someone who does social and someone who does website because you've grown that much. And so if you do all of these, this is kind of like the process we have gone through, and we have seen e-commerce businesses that do it right. This is the process. The problem is most of us flip it on its head and we start by outsourcing the thing that's a little hard and not as enjoyable to do up front, which is advertising and those high activities. We outsource things that are hard but are also the most expensive, when we need to flip that and outsource the things that are easy to do, the cheapest to outsource, so we can spend our time on the highest value things that produce the greatest revenue and ascend in that order. You, my friend, have been listening to the Ecommerce Alley podcast produced by Dylan Counts. We appreciate you listening to this podcast. If you enjoy it, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube and hit subscribe, or leave us a rating. It takes like 10 seconds with your thumb on whatever device or podcast audio you're listening on. It would mean a lot to us. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next episode.